Rome, 150 AD. The Cornelii family owns 17 properties across the city, maintains grain contracts with Egypt worth 300,000 denarii annually, holds government war bonds issued after the Marcus Aurelius campaigns, and keeps 200,000 denarii in deposits at the Temple of Saturn, earning guaranteed interest. 3 generations of accumulated wealth, conservative management, no speculation, no risk, everything positioned in what Roman financial advisors called the safest possible assets. Fixed income, stable returns, government guarantees. The family's wealth manager, a respected freedman named Quintus, maintained detailed ledgers showing predictable cash flows extending decades into the future. Rental agreements locked in for 10-year terms, bond maturities scheduled through 180 AD, temple deposits earning 4% annually in perpetuity. On papyrus, the family looked financially unshakable. 110 years later, the last surviving Cornelius died in the Subura slums owning nothing, not because of war, plague, or political persecution, because of one financial decision the family never questioned. They held their vast wealth and assets denominated in a currency that was being systematically destroyed, and the income those assets generated stayed numerically identical while becoming worthless. This is the forensic autopsy of the single mistake that annihilated Rome's elite families. Not stupidity, not recklessness, prudence. The very conservatism that was supposed to protect them became the mechanism of their destruction. Let me show you exactly how wealth dies when you make the fatal error of confusing nominal stability with real value. The mistake began with a reasonable assumption. The denarius had been stable for 200 years. Since Augustus reformed the currency, the silver content remained consistent at approximately 98%. The wealthy families of Rome built their financial planning on that foundation. Steady currency meant fixed income investments were genuinely safe. A rental agreement for 100 denarii monthly would generate 100 denarii monthly in real purchasing power indefinitely. A government bond promising repayment of 10,000 denarii in 10 years would return 10,000 denarii worth exactly what they were worth at purchase. The assumption was correct for 2 centuries. Then Emperor Nero faced a problem. The Great Fire of Rome in 64 AD required massive reconstruction spending. Frontier wars consumed imperial revenues. The treasury faced a choice: raise taxes visibly and risk political backlash, or reduce the silver content of coins slightly and generate the same nominal revenue from less metal. Nero chose debasement, reduced the denarius from 98% silver to 90%. Most Romans noticed nothing. The coins looked identical, face value unchanged. Prices adjusted slowly enough that the change felt gradual and manageable. But here's what the Cornelii family didn't understand. Once debasement begins, it never stops. Every subsequent emperor faced the same fiscal pressure. Military expenses continued, administrative costs grew, and the politically easiest solution was always the same: debase slightly more, mint more coins with less silver, generate short-term revenue, let the next emperor handle inflation. The door Nero opened never closed. By 100 AD, the denarius was 80% silver. By 150 AD, when the Cornelii were at peak wealth, 60%. By 200 AD, 50%. By 260 AD, under 5%. From 98% to 5% in 2 centuries. The Cornelii family's mistake was holding assets that generated fixed payments denominated in this dying currency. Their rental properties, managed conservatively with long-term agreements, generated predictable denarii income. The number of denarii received never changed. The rental contract specified 100 denarii monthly per unit. That number appeared in the ledgers month after month, year after year, decade after decade. 100 denarii arriving like clockwork. But those 100 denarii which bought a month of household supplies in 150 AD, bought a week of supplies in 200 AD, and a single day's bread in 260 AD. The income stream stayed numerically identical while its real value evaporated completely. The family couldn't raise rent significantly. Roman custom and tenant protection laws made dramatic rent increases difficult and socially unacceptable. They were locked into agreements written when the denarius contained 60% silver, still being paid in denarii that contained 5%. The rental income, which had sustained 3 generations, became worthless while the ledgers showed the same numbers. Their government bonds operated identically. The family had patriotically purchased war bonds during the Marcus Aurelius campaigns against Germanic tribes and Parthian wars. These bonds promised fixed repayment schedules, 10,000 denarii principal plus interest paid over defined terms. The government honored every payment precisely as contracted. The denarii arrived on schedule, but the denarii arriving in 220 AD bought half what the denarii invested in 170 AD had bought. The family received nominal repayment while suffering real loss. Being a creditor to a government debasing its currency meant being repaid in progressively worthless money. The bond performed exactly as promised nominally. The wealth was transferred from the Cornelii to the state through currency debasement. Their temple deposits faced the same invisible destruction, 200,000 denarii earning 4% annually in the Temple of Saturn, 8,000 denarii interest yearly, safe, guaranteed, managed by priests. The principal remained untouched. The interest payments arrived, but 200,000 denarii in 150 AD, when the coin was 60% silver, could purchase vast quantities of goods, property, commodities. 200,000 denarii in 250 AD, when the coin was 10% silver, could purchase almost nothing. The number stayed the same. The value evaporated. The final element of their portfolio was pension rights and annuities. The family had secured guaranteed payments for retired family members and elderly dependents, fixed denarii amounts payable for life. These seemed like responsible wealth preservation, protecting the most vulnerable family members with guaranteed income. When the currency collapsed, those fixed payments became cruel jokes. An annuity of 50 denarii monthly, established when 50 denarii bought substantial goods, continued paying 50 denarii monthly when 50 denarii bought a loaf of bread. The pensioners starved on schedule payments. Here's the critical insight the Cornelii never grasped. They confused nominal stability with real value. The numbers in their ledgers stayed stable. 100 denarii rent, 10,000 denarii bond payment, 8,000 denarii annual interest, 50 denarii pension. The numerical stability created an illusion of security. But those numbers represented claims on future purchasing power, and those claims were only valid if the currency maintained its value. When the issuing authority systematically destroyed the currency, the claims became worthless while remaining nominally unchanged. The family watched their income statements show consistent numbers while their actual purchasing power collapsed. They were being robbed in plain sight through a mechanism so gradual and technical that they never identified it as theft. By the time the collapse became undeniable, repositioning was impossible. Their wealth was already gone, transferred through debasement to the state and to debtors who repaid in worthless currency. Contrast this with the few elite families who survived. The Antonii family, rivals of the Cornelii, made different choices. They held minimal fixed income assets. Instead, they converted wealth to physical gold and stored it outside institutional control. They owned productive farmland that generated food regardless of currency values. They maintained business interests with export revenues paid in foreign currency. They developed practical skills and workshops producing tangible goods. When the denarius collapsed, the Antonii measured their wealth in gold that couldn't be debased, land that produced calories, foreign currency that remained stable, and productive capacity that generated real value. The Cornelii measured their wealth in denarii denominated claims that evaporated. Both families started wealthy. Different asset allocation, total divergence of outcomes. The documented evidence is specific. The Digest of Roman Law and surviving papyri from Roman Egypt show rental agreements, bond contracts, and temple deposits all denominated in denarii with fixed payment schedules. Price data from the same sources show the purchasing power of those denarii collapsing as silver content declined. A modius of wheat costing 8 denarii in 150 AD cost 200 denarii in 250 AD. A rental income of 100 denarii monthly, adequate for comfortable living in 150 AD, couldn't purchase a week of food in 250 AD. The numbers in contracts stayed the same, the value disappeared. The mistake wasn't choosing fixed income. The mistake was choosing fixed income denominated in a currency being systematically debased by a government running permanent deficits. Once that process began, it never reversed. Every emperor chose debasement over discipline. The Cornelii assumed the system would maintain standards. The assumption was fatal. Contemporary parallels are immediate and obvious. United States government bonds, called the safest investment in the world, are fixed-income securities denominated in dollars. Those dollars are being created at unprecedented rates. Federal Reserve balance sheet expansion, government deficit spending, M2 money supply growth. The mechanism is different from Roman silver debasement, but the effect is identical. Expansion of currency supply relative to goods and services, each dollar representing a smaller claim on real economic output. Fixed income assets denominated in expanding currency face the exact same trap the Cornelii faced. The nominal payments arrive on schedule, the real value evaporates over time. A 30-year treasury bond purchased today promises fixed dollar payments. Those payments will arrive precisely as contracted. But if the dollar loses half its purchasing power over that 30 years through monetary expansion, the bondholder suffers a 50% real loss while receiving 100% nominal repayment. Rental properties with long-term leases denominated in dollars face the same dynamic. A commercial lease signed today at $5,000 monthly might seem stable. If inflation runs at 7% annually, that $5,000 loses half its purchasing power in 10 years. The landlord receives $5,000 monthly throughout. The real income collapses. The lease seems to provide stability. The stability is nominal only. Pension systems promising fixed dollar payments face identical pressure. A pension of $3,000 monthly seems secure. If currency debasement continues, $3,000 in 20 years might buy what $1,000 buys today. The pensioner receives the promised amount and starves on it. This isn't speculation about what might happen. This is documentation of what did happen to Rome's wealthiest families. They held assets denominated in debasing currency. The assets performed exactly as contracted nominally. The wealth was destroyed systematically. The mistake was trusting that the issuing authority would maintain discipline when every structural incentive pushed toward debasement. The lesson from the Cornelii is not avoid all fixed income. The lesson is understand what your assets are actually denominated in. A rental property generating income in a stable currency or in a currency you can adjust rents within is different from one locked into long-term agreements in debasing currency. A bond denominated in gold or in a currency with structural constraints on expansion is different from one denominated in fiat currency issued by a government running permanent deficits. The distinction is everything. The Cornelii died poor because they held claims on debasing denarii. The Antoni survived because they held gold, land, and foreign currency. Both were conservative. One understood what they owned, the other confused nominal contracts with real value. That confusion destroyed 3 generations of accumulated wealth in 1 century. Subscribe if you want to see the pattern before it repeats. The question isn't whether currency will be debased. The question is whether you're holding claims denominated in the currency being debased or assets that hold value independently. Rome's rife este animuerta.